We are back with another episode of AKP Sports Talk. It's actually our 100th episode, so it's kind of crazy how fast this has come. Um, but yeah, so obviously we've reached the Final Four, so we've had a lot of madness in March go on. But before we get into it, how are you doing today, Korea?
Look, I'm not gonna lie, I'm $1,000 richer. I mean, how else can I be? I'm amazing. I'm on top of the moon. Shout out to my the Sweet Six parlay, the Sweet 16 parlay. That I cooked up. I went 6-0. So shout out to that. But I um I am doing great. It's kind of crazy. Like we always say, how March Madness is one of the most like anticipated moments of the year, and then it just flies by so quickly. And we took a little bit of a break. Obviously, I was down in Arizona, as you know, and we were watching the games, and we saw this has to be the craziest year that I've ever seen of March Madness. And just recapping everything that happened from the first four, and now we're just days away from the Final Four, and then a week from today, the national championship game in Houston, Texas. I'm very excited.
Yeah, so we'll just kind of go region by region. Let's see. Is that good? Can you see that?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. Let's see. Make it a little bit bigger. So we'll start in the South, where we had a couple of big upsets. I guess I'm not sure if you'd call Furman a huge upset because Virginia wasn't like that big of a favorite in that game. But then you had the huge upset on the bottom, Princeton over Arizona. And then Princeton not only won that game, but then beats Missouri to get to the Sweet 16. So that was obviously one of the best stories of the tournament. And then you had Alabama getting by, their first round in Maryland, San Diego State beating Furman, Creighton beating Baylor in the second round, and then Creighton ending the Cinderella run of Princeton in the Sweet 16. San Diego State upsetting Alabama in the Sweet 16. And then the other day we had San Diego State just barely scrapping by Creighton on a last-second foul with literally 1 second left. And Dorian Trammell hitting one of two free throws to help San Diego State advance to, I believe, it's their first ever Final Four appearance. Korea, what's kind of your overall breakdown and kind of what you saw from this region up to this point?
Oh, this region. I got a lot to say about this region. We're gonna start with the bottom here, and Ari, I don't mean to badger your team in any way, but that was a disappointing effort. I mean, you understand that was disappointing. Obviously, a lot of people had Arizona going pretty far. I had them actually losing the Sweet 16 to Creighton, so and I'll get into Creighton later with that Fugazi call at the end, and oh god, and then I don't know. I just feel like Princeton just exposed the fact that obviously Arizona was one of the highest paced teams coming into the tournament. They love to push. They love to push the ball up the court, to force, and not in terms of forcing turnovers, but on the fast break. That's what they do. That's what they value a lot more. And when you slow them down and they're not making shots, I mean, that's pretty much the recipe for how to really upset a team who loves to push the pace. If they're not making shots on their end, slow the tempo and just make your shots on the other end. And then, for Princeton as well, exposing the Fugazi Mizzou Tigers, and I like to call them Fugazi because they have a great offense but no defense. Their KenPom rating defense was 179th. They had one of the worst defenses in the country. And it's kind of like the Utah State because, I'll just get into the Utah State game right now. So Utah State, I picked Utah State because they live and die by the three, and they live and die by their offense. And their offense wasn't clicking. Mizzou's was. That's how they won. Simple as that. And then Mizzou's offense wasn't clicking. their defense couldn't stop Princeton. That's how Princeton won. And so that's how Princeton got to the Sweet 16, really. You go up the ladder a bit, and you go up the ladder a little bit, and then, Tarkavius Smith of NC State, he is a star. I want to just get that out of the way. I was getting a little scared because I had Creighton going all the way to the Final Four, and I was like, this guy is dangerous. He can shoot the ball. He's a good defender, but he doesn't really have a great surrounding cast. And even with Creighton's low bench, I knew that was going to be the hardest game for them on this path to the Elite Eight, and it really was, because that game was really fun to watch. And then Creighton blew out Baylor, and then even though it was kind of close, Creighton still won by 11 against Princeton. And that game, I don't want to talk about that Elite Eight game. That has to be one of the worst endings in an NCAA game.
You don't think his hand was on his hip though?
I'm not talking. I'm just the whole. We'll get into that a little bit. We go up the ladder bit here, and then look. You can say it was an upset. I would say that I had Virginia in one bracket, and then in the other one I had Furman, and I feel like Virginia's offense was just not going to show up. And it was a really good game, pretty much the entire game, right? This was literally like one of the first games on Thursday, really to kick off the whole NCAA tournament. Furman, this little school out of Greenville, South Carolina, they have the third best offense in basketball. They're third in scoring. They can shoot the ball well, but the thing is, Virginia plays so good defense, right? But if their offense can't show up, it's going to be a hard game for them to win. And then obviously you can't write what happened in the final seconds with Kihei Clark being trapped in the corner. He hurls it across the court. He doesn't know he has a timeout left. The Furman guy, whoever it was, caught the ball. He passed it up court. They hit a deep three with like a few seconds remaining. You to take the lead. You can't write that. That's just the magic of March. So with that one, I feel like, look, I really said it could go either way, right? I feel like Furman, because of how potent their offensive and their three-point shooting is, if Virginia can't shoot the ball, then Furman is definitely going to keep this a close game, and they definitely did. So shout out to Furman. And then San Diego State and Charleston, a lot of people were picking Charleston. This was like one of the biggest upsets that I saw in terms of people saying that they're going to be an upset. But I knew that San Diego State's defense was for real, that they were not going to get that. The Charleston Cougars weren't going to get past them. And even though Charleston had a great year, they went 31-3, all the losses that they had were pretty much against, teams where, their one loss, they had one loss to number one UNC at the time. This was like way, way back at the beginning of the season for Charleston. And then their two conference losses, they just shot really bad from three-point range. And San Diego State is one of the best teams at defending the three-point ball. So that was just a horrible matchup for Charleston. San Diego State squeaked by, but they got the win. And then, they had a favorable matchup against a Furman team who loves to shoot the ball from three. And then they exposed the Fugazi Alabama Crimson Tide. I like to call them Fugazi as well, because I knew that they weren't going to get past the Elite Eight. But, Maryland and West Virginia as well, I thought that was a good game to kick off the tournament. Joe Toussaint and that West Virginia squad really kept it close, but Maryland and the Terps, definitely ran away with it near the end, just gapping the lead. And then we all knew Alabama was going to beat Texas A&M Corpus Christi. But then we got the Sweet 16, Alabama and SDSU. That was a really fun game. Alabama had a really, really big lead heading into half, and then San Diego State just kept crawling back throughout the second half. And, made it like a 5-10 point game, then a 5-point game, then took the lead, and then they were hitting their shots and defending well. That's how San Diego State kind of plays basketball. They really adjust at halftime. Brian Dutcher, really great coach. And, that was a great game to watch. And then Creighton and obviously Princeton. But then we had the unfortunate travesty of that horrible, horrible game yesterday between SDSU and Creighton. No discredit to the Aztecs. They played – I'm not going to – look, there were some people on Twitter that are saying, like, oh, people shouldn't discredit SDSU. That's not what I'm going to do here. I'm not going to discredit the fact that SDSU really defended the three-point ball well against a good three-point shooting team in Creighton. I'm not going to defend the fact that SDSU shot the ball well near the end of the stretch to not only cut the lead, take the lead, expand on the lead, and get the win. But the last pretty much 6.5 seconds were very, very controversial to where it really puts an asterisk on SDSU's win. Now, yes, Ari, that was
like someone that took Creighton.
Well, yes, I did take Creighton. I will gladly admit it. I did take Creighton. I was the only person in our group that had Creighton in the Final Four. One person had been in the championship, but I was one of 2 people that had Creighton in the Final Four. That was a perfect opportunity for me. I was like, Creighton has a path. It looks like Ari disconnected for a little bit, but as I was saying, the last few seconds, right? First, it was the whole blunder with the foul, no foul. Look, he had his hand on the hip, but in the moment, do you call it a foul? It looked like his shooting motion wasn't going to be like absolutely horribly affected, even though, yes, the hand was on the hip. I know. You can, I'm not making an excuse here. I'm not advocating for that. I feel like in the moment, that could have gone either way. In the moment, that could have gone either way. And then in in like the final seconds, right? I think it was Trammell. I forgot who's at the line. I think it was Trammell at the line. And he makes 1 of 2, right? They go up. Hi, Ari. Welcome back. So I'm just explaining that controversial ending. So, they have the, I explained the foul, no foul. I say, look, in the moment, right? In the moment, it can go either way, right? In the moment, it can really go either way. But when you slow it down and you look at reviews, yes, his hand was on the hip. That's a foul. But did it really, really affect his shooting motion so much to where he?
He kind of pushed him a little bit. The argument I heard from some people was that they just weren't calling a lot, for most of the game, and so why call it then? And so, to that degree, I get that, but if you just take that play in of itself without the rest of the game, making a difference, then to me that was a foul. But if you want to say that they weren't going to call that earlier in the game or whatever, or they weren't calling that, then that's one argument. But if you just take that one play in of itself, regardless of the rest of the game, then to me that was a foul. Obviously, it's tough to end the game in that fashion, but to me, a foul is a foul, whether it happens with 1 second left in the game or with 20 minutes left in the game.
Yeah, and I'm not against that. What happened after was the real disgrace. That whole 1.2 seconds. Shireman, first of all, his foot never got inbounds. Okay, he air mails it, right? It goes off of SDSU, right? But apparently the issue was that the clock, the operator didn't even start it correctly, which was already strike number 1. Right, leading to the fact that there were an extra couple tenths of a second on the clock as soon as I forgot who it was defending Kaluma down near the basket. After he deflected it, there were about 3 seconds left, so that affected that. Strike number 2, and then the third strike is there was nothing resolved. They just said, you know what, we're just going to call the game off with 2.3 seconds on the clock. I have never seen such blasphemy and disgrace from the NCAA than I've seen in 1.2 seconds of basketball. I have never seen any more disgraceful act that I've seen than from what was yesterday, because that was just hideous. I mean, you have to acknowledge that there is time. There was clear time. Everyone saw that there were 0.3 seconds. And then Gene Steratore on the post talking about, the human eye and, the human. I don't want to hear about human effect. There were 0.3 seconds. Acknowledge that there were 0.3 seconds. That was absolutely horrible. look, and I've seen all these people talking about, oh, it wasn't going to affect the game, and you have to really take the human element into this, and I don't want to hear that. Just acknowledge the fact that there were 0.3 seconds on the damn clock. I'm sorry. Yeah. It really taints the fact that like SDSU won by one. Like, yes, and that was the reason, because like there was time enough for Kyle Burner to at least tip it in off an inbound play, and they could have gotten the win because it was a 1 point game, because he missed 1 of 2 from the line, because of the foul. So it all comes like the last 6.7 seconds has to be one of the worst. That has to be the most controversial ending to a game ever. But we're here now. It's over. I can't really keep complaining about it because my bracket's toast. Crane's in the excuse me. I say Crane because they should be. SDSU in the Final Four. Look, I am proud of this Aztec team. I was a huge purporter of the Mountain West, right? I was the person who was like, let's get this team 4 teams in. And they got 4. I was hoping for 5 with New Mexico, but New Mexico choked near the end of the season. So I can't, but they were in the NIT, so good for them. But, the SD, and then to see how disappointing the Mountain West started this year, right, with Boise State losing to Northwestern in the first round because they couldn't shoot the ball, or Utah State losing because they couldn't shoot the ball, or Nevada in the play-in game against ASU, they got brutally beat down in the first half because they couldn't shoot the ball either. And it was all down to SDSU. Could SDSU be the one team that can actually lead the Mountain West out of this streak of no wins in the NCAA tournament? Because the last win came from Nevada back in 2018. Do you know how long ago, Ari? 2018. That was the last Mountain West win. And then, great for Brian Dutcher. He finally gets a big win against, a pretty good Charleston team as a 12 seed that a lot of people picked as an upset. And then, they dominated Furman, and then they shut down Alabama in the second half. They did the same thing for Creighton. So they ended up in the Final Four. I'm happy. I'm happy for them, and in their program, who is moving to the Pac-12 soon. So that's why I'm a little more happy that SDSU is representing in the Final Four. They're a great program. They, like I said, I feel this is retribution for their 2020 season, where they were one of the best teams in the nation. They were 30-2, and then obviously COVID became a thing, and it took away from what a great season it was. So this is definitely retribution for Brian Dutcher and his staff. Great season for the Aztecs, representing the Mountain West well, and as a 5 seed, being in the Final Four, just off of one of the craziest seasons, craziest tournaments that I've seen in a while, especially from a fun region like this, the South region, that had a lot of upsets.
Yeah, one of 3 participants in the Final Four making their first trip to the Final Four. We'll get into the other teams as we move along. So we'll go down now to the East region, where we had, the biggest upset of the tournament, and Fairleigh Dickinson being able to somehow scrap out the win over Purdue, the second ever 16 seed to beat a 1 seed. So obviously that was the biggest kind of storyline in this region up until we get to FAU, who make their magical path to the Final Four, barely last second getting by Memphis in the first round. And then you move down to the first round. One of the other popular upsets was Oral Roberts over Duke, and Duke controlled that entire game from start to finish with a 20-plus point win. You had Tennessee barely getting by Louisiana in the first round. Kentucky over Providence. You had Michigan State beating USC, and then you go up to the second round, and then you had FAU ending the Cinderella run early of Fairleigh Dickinson. Tennessee really, even without Sakai Ziegler, their defense really stepped up against Duke. I think it was in the first half, Duke had 15 turnovers, something crazy in the first half, and they shot terribly in that game as well. You had Kansas State getting by Kentucky. Michigan State upsetting Marquette in the second round. And then the Sweet 16, FAU's run, led by Janelle Davis, continued beating Tennessee despite trailing pretty big at times in that game. And then Kansas State beat Michigan State in a thriller in overtime. You have Marquise Noel breaking the NCAA tournament record for assists, with I think he had 19 assists in that game. And then you had another thriller the other day in the Elite Eight with FAU getting by Kansas State to have one of two Florida teams in the Final Four. Again, another very, very crazy region from start to finish. Korea, what was your takeaways and breakdown of this region?
I mean, first off, can we put that comment up, the first one? The first one. Yeah, right there. That is actually happening. Hootie hoo. Let's go Owls. That's all I wanted to say first. This has to be one of the most disappointing yet craziest regions ever with March Madness. First off, the upset of the century, Fairleigh Dickinson, huh? Those Knights, huh? Dimitri Roberts, those guys out of Jersey, they stopped Zach Edey, the shortest team in college basketball, right? The shortest team stopped 7 foot, whatever height he is, Zach Edey. What, he's like 7'3", right, or something?
It's like 7, yeah, like I think like 7'4", 7'5", I think.
They stopped 7'5" Zach Edey. Come on. I mean, well, it was mostly due to the backcourt issues. Like I said, that's how you stop Purdue. Like the plan has been out. The plan has been out since Indiana beat them. All you do is stop the backcourt, let Zach Edey cook. Let have him have like 30 inside. But if they can't get more than 60 because their backcourt is having bad issues, you can stop that easily. So I feel like that is the only reason as to why Purdue lost the season. Exactly. Purdue guard play has been really bad.
It was the same thing with Arizona at the end, where like no one wanted to take a shot at the end. They were all like extremely hesitant because obviously they were, struggling from three the entire game, and so there was no dog that wanted to step up at the end to take that shot when the close game at the end. So.
Exactly. And then Tobin Anderson, the former coach of FDU, after they absolutely beat down Texas Southern in their opening game, he literally said that the more he sees this Purdue team, the more he thinks they could beat them. And look what happened, huh? What a great story for that program. Unfortunately, Tobin Anderson, obviously, after his loss in the second round to FAU, he took the job at Iona. And then obviously because Rick Pitino left because he took the job at St. John's. So, good stuff for Tobin Anderson. And he was such an amazing just human in general. Just seeing his post game after they beat Purdue and kept it close with FAU. It's definitely amazing to see. So what a great program. And, especially because the fact that FDU wasn't even the team that won their postseason tournament. It was Merrimack, but because Merrimack wasn't eligible due to NCAA transition rules from D2 to D1, FDU was the tournament bid winner. So FDU shouldn't have been in tournament, but just by luck, they become one of America's sweethearts in another year of crazy upsets in March Madness. And then moving down to Memphis and FAU. Look, this one, Jesus, God, this one still upsets me because I had Memphis in the Sweet Six. That should be Memphis. That should be FAU. Yeah, exactly. That should be Memphis right now. Memphis should be on that miracle run, but no, they just had to turn the ball over with 5 seconds remaining. Why are you doing that, Kendrick Davis? You don't have to play hero ball. These guys, and that's the thing with these college athletes. They think they have to play hero ball, right? You don't need to. Just play team basketball, right? Try to draw the foul. Try to do something. Call a timeout. Anything. And credit to FAU. They're a top 50 team in both offensive and defensive efficiency at KenPom. And no disrespect to the Owls. And obviously they're on this Cinderella path to the Final Four, but it should be Memphis. It should be Memphis so bad. And it just pains me to say this, but and Kendrick Davis, he literally was on one leg at one point. We saw him hobbling on one leg. And I told myself before the tournament started, I said, whoever wins that Memphis FAU game, it was going to be a coin toss, because I literally could not pick that game because that was such a hard game for me to choose. So, and I wasn't going to get myself upset at whoever won and lost. So I'm not upset at FAU of winning that game. Obviously, it just should have been Memphis. Memphis should be in the Final Four right now. But credit to FAU and Dusty May and what just he has done with that program. And you mentioned guys like Jonell Davis and, you know, all the stars from Boca Raton are now going to Houston, baby. They're bringing the Beach Boys, so shout out to FAU to making it to the Final Four. I think that game against SDSU is going to be a lot of fun. You know, I think it's going to be a very slow tempo game just because of how you know, they both kind of play. You know, FAU kind of loves to somewhat push the tempo a little bit, but they also love to slow it down. And, you know, Dustin May loves to adjust. And then Brian Dutcher, his second half adjustments are so key. So I feel like that's going to be one of the best games. That's on Saturday at 3. And then, you know, we'll get to the other side. But continuing on this side, Duke Oral Roberts, that was another popular 12-5 matchup. A lot of people had Oral Roberts just because, you know, they completely ran through the Summit League and they went perfect 18-0, and then they won the conference tournament, you know, not losing a game. They had one of the best offenses with Max Asmus and, you know, Connor Vanover, the 7'1" center inside, and, you know, they had size and they had some defense inside, but in total their defense was just not great compared to Duke's. And, you know, Duke just took advantage of that because Duke is one of the best perimeter 3 defensive teams in the country, and, you know, they exposed Asmus, and, you know, that was unfortunately a sad moment to see, you know, Max Amos in his final game, you know, just get beat down by John Schreier's Duke squad. And, you know, I actually had Duke in the championship game. So to see him lose in the next round was very heartbreaking, to say the least. But, yeah, they were definitely one of the scary teams out of the first round, stopping a very high offensive team in Oral Roberts. But, you know, against Tennessee in the second round, who they beat against Louisiana in the first round, you know, I thought Duke was going to win this game just because of the fact that even though Zakai Ziegler was out, I just thought that, you know, these two defensive teams, I thought that Duke was just going to, you know, shoot a lot more better. But the turnovers and just the turnover game was the reason as to why Duke lost that game. So it was nothing but turnovers for Duke. They turned over the ball, I believe, I think over 14 times or something in that game against Tennessee. Obviously, Tennessee has the best defense in the country, so I kind of knew that was going to be a sweat, but, you know, to see Duke lose in that fashion was just really bad. If they could have just not turned over the ball, I think they definitely could have kept that game close, maybe even won that game, but they lose to Tennessee. But then obviously we talked about FAU beating Tennessee, you know, just the fact that their offense in the second half, Tennessee's offense, was just inexistent throughout that second half, even though that was a very low-scoring game. That was also one of my picks on my Sweet Six. I picked the under. A very low scoring game. The fact that FAU's offense was still, you know, at least there enough versus Tennessee's, which just fell apart in the second half, was the reason FAU won that game. So, you know, credit to the Owls for winning that. And you go down a little bit more, and then Kentucky and Providence, and, you know, Kentucky, the way Oscar Tshiebwe was just inside dominating, right? That was a given. I knew he was going to win that matchup inside. He had 20-something rebounds, and they beat Providence. But put that comment about Jacob Toppin. I want to see that again. Yep. I want to see that again because that is true. This man is the most overrated college basketball player of all time because they sold against K-State. And I mean sold because they could not hit a shot. My God, him and Antonio Reeves could not hit a shot. Couldn't hit a shot. Unbelievable. But at the same time, you have to credit this K-State team and what they did. And, you know, obviously we saw all the videos of them listening to Lowdown by Lil Baby in the locker room, doing the clapping, and Jerome Tame getting lit. And, you know, they're just having a fun time. And we saw the emergence of Marquise Noel. And, wow, that man can play basketball. His first round game against Montana State, he dominated. And then we saw him really take the shine against Kentucky. And then, you know, his first game in the Garden against Michigan State, he had that great game of, you know, I think like setting the record of 19 assists and that overtime win against Michigan State. And, he had a great game against FAU and just came up a little bit short in the closing minutes when FAU came back and took the lead back from Kansas State in the Elite Eight to go on to the Final Four. But, great story, and, credit to Jerome Tang as well for actually going to the Owls locker room after the game and saying, that was the hardest team they've played, and, they're rooting for FAU to win the whole thing. So that's just, another reason to why you should like this Kansas State team a lot more. And, Jerome Tang is going to be there for a while, and I feel like K-State is definitely going to be looked at potentially winning maybe some recruiting battles, especially in state with Kansas and Bill Self and what Jerome Tang has done in 1 year. Kansas fell out in the Sweet 16 without Bill Self, and that's due to nothing that we can control. But, it's just a sad story. And then obviously you have K-State and what Jerome Tang has done in year one with guys like Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson. And, all they have is just a lot of fun to see. So, credit to what they've done and, what K-State is doing. And I think they're going to be a dangerous team in a very, very loaded Big 12 next year, because next year the Big 12 is going to have teams like Houston, BYU, UCF, and Cincinnati now in, because that's the first year. So the Big 12 is going to be taking a absolutely big step next year. So that's going to be the best basketball conference. And then we come down to the final two games of this region, and Michigan State and USC. Look, Drew Peterson was obviously a question mark coming into this game. We didn't know whether or not he wasn't going to play or was. He ended up playing, but him and Kendrick, him and not Kendrick Davis, Boogie Ellis, the other point guard, the old Memphis point guard. Boogie Ellis, talking about not showing up. My goodness, he stunk. Oh my God. He could not get a shot to fall in. And, it just happens sometimes, so I feel like that's really no credit to anyone or whatever. But, sometimes we just have those days where, the ball's not falling in. And that was kind of the reason why, Michigan State won, and also forcing turnovers. And Tom Izzo in March, that's what we always say. Tom Izzo in March is always definitely just someone you have to watch out for. And then obviously against Marquette, the only reason they won was just because Marquette was turning over the ball every 15 seconds. My goodness, if they was a competition for most turnovers, Marquette would easily have won, because they were just giving the ball to Michigan State. So that is why they won. And obviously I feel like the game of the tournament, Michigan State, Kansas State in the Garden, that game went into overtime. That was just a fun game to watch. And you see guys like AJ Hoggard and Tyson Walker and Joey Hauser, go back and forth with guys like Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson and stuff like that. That was definitely a fun Sweet 16 game to watch. And then finally, Marquette and Vermont. Obviously, Marquette just dominated throughout that whole game. And then, we talked about Tyler Coley, and I thought Shaka Smart, was going to be able to get this team past, Michigan State, but I was kind of sweating this one, and I didn't really know if Shaka Smart in that team, because I knew if their offense got cold, then it was going to be a really, really hard game for them to win, because it's always about their offense and not forcing turnovers. And if they force turnovers, then they lose games. So, it was definitely kind of a recipe for disaster there for the Golden Eagles. But this definitely was the region of chaos, Ari. I definitely will say one of the craziest regions that I've ever seen. We had a 16-9 matchup where FAU is now in the Final Four, beating teams like Memphis, obviously, FDU, who will beat Purdue, and then obviously a good defensive Tennessee team, and then obviously K-State, and just how, offensively they are one of the better teams in the Big 12 as well. So, be able to stop them. So definitely a very chaotic region. And now we have an emerging champion of the East region, the Florida Atlantic Owls. Boca Raton is going crazy because their Owls are going to Houston.
Yeah, just real quickly, what do you think about this? I feel like Kendrick Davis he averaged over 19 points the last 2 years at SMU, and then close to 22 this year with Memphis. So I feel like he has that just ability to create his own shot, to where he's definitely going to get a shot. He's a senior. I think it's his last year eligibility, but maybe he has one more. You never you never really know, when you really are out of eligibility for most players. But what do you think about his, prospect as an NBA player, Kendrick Davis?
Yeah, I feel like it's growing. I feel like he definitely could be maybe a second rounder at the very latest. I just feel like with guys overseas, and then obviously G League Ignite, and obviously like some of the top guys who are already being mentioned for the draft, guys like Brandon Miller, and some of the top draft picks from college itself. I feel like maybe one more year in the NBA one more year in college for Kendrick Davis at Memphis, and I feel like maybe he'll raise his draft stock a little more, just because Memphis. I feel like it's still going to be. I feel like with Houston leaving, I feel like this opens the door for Memphis to be winning that conference a lot more guaranteeing them as a tournament favorite. So I feel like why not run it back, especially in a year where the top team is going to be leaving the conference after the last year, where you just won the tournament as well, because Houston lost the final game. So like, why not make it back to back? So I feel like Kendrick Davis should definitely stay in college for one more year, even though I feel like right now he would be maybe like a late second round, maybe early to late second round NBA pick, just because of how offensively he is. Just he averages so many, just because he is the guy offensively. But I feel like he should stay in college maybe just one more year.
Yeah, I think I agree if he has another year eligibility, but again, I'm not entirely sure. But we'll move on to the West region, just right here, which was another fun region. Not really. It looks like was the higher seed in the higher seed in every single game in the first round won. So that's a bit of a change from the last two regions that we went over. Um, the first game between TCU and ASU was really good. It came down. I thought ASU was going to pull away. I think they were up by like 7 with like 5 or 6 minutes left, and they just kind of folded at the end. And we saw Mike Miles kind of take over for TCU at the end of that game. There wasn't too many other really like super close games in the first round. But then you move on to the second round, and that's where we saw a big upset, Arkansas over Kansas. As you mentioned, Bill Self had some medical issues, I believe it was, and he wasn't able to be on the sidelines in that game. And we saw Arkansas pull away with a 1-point win, and Musselman take off his shirt at the end, and that was the story in of itself. But we were saying leading into the tournament that Arkansas had the talent to make a run. Entering the season, they were considered a top, I think it was like top 10 to 15 team heading into the season. They just kind of dealt with injuries and just kind of there just wasn't any kind of like chemistry, it seemed like, with that team. Obviously, that could happen with a lot of transfers, but, when they needed to play well together, in the tournament, they were able to do so in those first two rounds against Illinois and Kansas. And then you had UConn kind of steamrolling their way the first couple rounds, and later you had Gonzaga barely beating TCU in the second round, 3-point win. Although they were up by 6, and it was like a 3-point at the buzzer that made a 3-point game for TCU. UCLA scrapped by Northwestern, and then we had another classic between Gonzaga and UCLA that went back and forth. And Gonzaga once again prevailed over UCLA, and then they got steamrolled by UConn in the Elite Eight. And then you had that's that region. And then UConn just kind of, you look at every game, they won by 24, 15, 23, and 28. So they've just really dominated this region. UConn was once the number 1 team in the country, and then they kind of hit a rough patch in the middle of the season. I think they lost like 4 or 5 or 5 or 6. But, they always had the talent, once being the number 1 ranked team, to make a run. And they just kind of got hot at the right time. So once again, this one probably wasn't quite as crazy as the other two regions, but still a lot that went down. What was your breakdown of this region?
Yeah, so I mean, we start at the top, and Kansas. The big question with Kansas was, they had all those quad one wins, but they were getting injured at the wrong time, and obviously the thing with everything with Bill Self and his health, we can't control that, and at the end of the day, we're all just hoping he's okay, but at the same time, it may have played a huge factor as to why K State, no, as to why Kansas, excuse me, not K State at all, as to why Kansas bowed out in the second round. And obviously, you can say it was because, of this and that. And at the same time, Arkansas and the Must Bus, Eric Musselman, it's real. And, this is the second time Arkansas has been a Sweet 16 team at the very least for at least the past 2 to 3 seasons in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, it goes all the way back to their Elite Eight run as a 3 seed back in the 2021 NCAA tournament. Last year when they beat Gonzaga, and then this year they beat Kansas. So this Arkansas team is for real in March, and we always look at them. And last year it was heading into this season, we saw Arkansas as one of the best teams, and you mentioned injuries and some just team chemistry issues were kind of the reason as to why this team wasn't winning throughout the regular season, but they made it, and they made a statement in March, even though they absolutely got beat down by UConn. And UConn just looks like the best team in basketball right now in March, just dominant offensively and defensively. We'll get into that a little later. And then obviously St. Mary's and VCU, the Gales. That was first one gets the 50 wins. I mean, they play very defensive basketball, very slow-paced teams. It was very, very, very slow, but St. Mary's got the win. But then obviously they had to play UConn. They just had no size matchup for Sunogo inside. And, UConn, it was looking a little scary against Iona at first, when they were it was pretty close. But then UConn in the second half just ran away with it. Dan Hurley and that squad just, the way that Hawkins and Sunogo just played, they played at a nuclear level. And I think they just kind of maintained that throughout the rest of the tournament. Beating St. Mary's comfortably, beating Arkansas comfortably, beating Gonzaga comfortably. And, now they find themselves in the Final Four, just a couple wins away from another NCAA championship. And the last time the last time UConn won, it was in Houston, Texas. So, maybe it's foreshadowing 11, almost 12 years later of what's going to happen with the UConn Huskies this year. But, just another great season for Dan Hurley and UConn after last year losing in the first round to New Mexico State. This year now going all the way to the Final Four, so great year for them. We go down the bracket a little bit. TCU, ASU, that was a great game. The last game of the first round, to kind of end the first round. Very back and forth game. And then obviously Mike Miles at the end of the game with the game winner, and down the stretch, just great back and forth. Desmond Cambridge showed up as well. I know, obviously, Arizona State rival for you, so I'll leave the beat down to you. But very back and forth game between the two. And then TCU obviously advanced in the next round, and Gonzaga, was looking a little bit close throughout the first half against Grand Canyon. Also, shout out Grand Canyon. They have a great student section. I mean, they have an electric student section. They show up, they get loud, they're awesome, but they couldn't match the Zags. And Saquon again, yes, it was a 3-point win, but it was technically a 6-point win because Gonzaga was up by 6, and then they hit this deep court 3 to for all the spread bettors out there. It was just for the spread bettors, it wasn't for anything else. Gonzaga only won that game, so I don't want to hear about they just won by 3. Well, they already won by 6, and then they hit the 3 just for the spread bettors. And then Gonzaga all the way to the Elite after ending UCLA's dream again of once again going to the Final Four. That was I'll get into that game a little bit, but just a great game as well with the good comeback for Gonzaga. And then the latter two, Northwestern, Boise State. Boise State couldn't get anything offensively. It was just boo-booey and just that Northwestern staff, being dominant once again throughout the season. They looked a little shaky going into the tournament after losing to Penn State in the Big Ten tournament, but they got a big win against a good Boise State team, and then UCLA UNC Asheville. That's a game where you thank UNC Asheville for showing up. You give them your check and you say see you next year, because that was a thank you, but we never don't want to see you. And then obviously UCLA defensively, we talked about how they don't have Jalen Clark. We knew it was going to be a factor, but it played a role in the second round game. Only beat a Northwestern team who they should have beat a little more comfortably. If they had Jalen Clark, but just the way he is such a good two-way player. They only won by 8, and then obviously I knew it was going to be a factor against the best offense in Gonzaga, but against one of the better teams defensively, but without no Jalen Clark, it was a factor.
And they were without Dembona too in that game.
Yeah, that's right, and they were missing more, so it just shows you like injuries. Like I said, wrong injuries at the wrong time, pile up, and it really plays a big role in your team around March. And that was one of the best games in the first round in the Sweet 16 as well. We saw Gonzaga be down by so much, they make the comeback. They take the lead, and then UCLA in like the final minute they go on this like 10-run run and they take the lead, and then I believe it was the Gonzaga missed a shot. They're up by 1, and then no, they're up by like. Yeah, they're up by like 1.
Amari Bailey hit the 3 for UCLA with like 12 seconds left.
And then they took the lead, and then obviously Mark Few said, we'll run the Jay Wright use Villanova versus UNC play, because Rasir Bolton just drives up the court. He passed to Julian Strother, and he hit that from the logo. I went crazy. The city of Spokane was going crazy, people. I live here, so I know. The city of Spokane was going crazy. And it was definitely a lot of fun to see. And then obviously Julian Strother, he gets the game-winning win, and he sends Gonzaga to the Elite Eight, where obviously UConn just unfortunately beat them down on all cylinders, just because that's the thing. Gonzaga does not have a defense, and Gonzaga, they stop you offensively, and that's the thing with this UConn team. UConn, they'll stop you and go on 10 runs, and then you'll be down by 10, and then you'll be down by 20, then you'll be down by 30, trying to just get a shot down, but they just stop you offensively, and then defensively, you can't do anything to stop them. And with Sanogo inside and Hawkins on the outside, that's why UConn has just been winning so comfortably. So UConn, I feel like they just deserve to be in the Elite Eight, just because in the Final Four, just because of how well they've looked throughout every single game this year in the NCAA tournament. So shout out to UConn. I feel like they're definitely the scariest team in the Final Four. If you look at all 3 teams as a 4 seed, I feel like they were definitely a little underseeded. I thought they were maybe a 3, but I feel like a 4 is definitely solid for them. But the way they've been playing like a 1. Beating every single opponent comfortably. So, but they definitely look the scariest team in the Final Four.
Yeah, number 4, UConn, the highest seed of the Final Four teams, which again goes to how crazy this tournament is. But we'll just quickly get into the last region, the Midwest, led by Houston. We had Pittsburgh beating Iowa State as probably the biggest first-round upset in this region. And then we had, Penn State beating Texas A&M. Second round, in the first half, Auburn gave Houston a little scare in the first half, but Houston outscored them by like 25-30, I think it was, in the second half, and ran away with that game. Miami started their run. There was a lot of people that had Drake beating Miami in the first round, and it looked like that they were going to win. And in the last 5 minutes, Miami goes on like a 15-1 run in the last 4 to 5 minutes to kind of take control of that game, and then they crush Indiana in the second round. Xavier escaped Pittsburgh in the second round. They won by 11, but I think it was closer than that for most of the game. And then Texas, too, barely scraped by Penn State in the second round. And then the Sweet 16, we talked about it all year, even though, their offense wasn't as big of a problem in this game, but we talked about how Houston's offense was, successful, just so inconsistent to where, they couldn't win in a shootout. And, against a Miami backcourt that when it gets going, it gets really going. Miami really just ended up crushing Houston, winning this game by 14. And then so their run continued to the Elite Eight, and Texas kind of takes care of business against Xavier for a Miami Texas Elite Eight in that region the other day, and Texas was up by, I think it was like 10 or 11 with like 8-9 minutes left, 10 minutes left, something like that, and Miami just kind of went on a run the last 7 to 10 minutes of that game and really won. They won by 7 when they were down by like almost double digits. So I was scoring by like 15 to 17, in that last like 10 or so minutes. So now they join FAU as the second Florida team in the Final Four. A great run by Larinaga and that team. They were kind of a trendy team to a degree, kind of all season, and their backcourt really carried them. Isaiah Wong and who's the other guard again?
Pack.
Yeah, Nigel Pack. Yeah, Nigel Pack and Isaiah Wong really carried them throughout this tournament and kind of all season long. So, here we are with the Final Four of a 5-5, 9-4. It was the first time, I think, ever that there was no number one seeds in the Elite Eight. So, there's that. But we'll kind of just close with this region. Your thoughts, Korea?
Yeah. First off, definitely you mentioned crazy that, there were no number one seeds past the Elite Eight. It's been the trend every year that there's at least one number one seed that gets past the Sweet 16 into the Elite Eight. First year that's never happened. Going into this region, Houston looked a little scary. The only reason they looked a little unfortunately scary was just because of the fact that Sasser, he did get injured, and injuries were starting to pile up with Shed, and just their defensive core were just getting more and more injured, and it was just an unfortunate downfall. And you mentioned in that game against Auburn, they were down by so much, and yes, it's kind of crazy that Auburn, which is 2 hours away from Birmingham, was playing Houston in Birmingham. So they were pretty much, it was almost like a home game for Auburn. So they could literally just make the 2 hour drive there. But it was definitely a fun game for Houston coming back in the second half, winning comfortably to move on to the next round. And then, the game against Miami, it was always, you mentioned, it was always the backcourt of Nigel Pack and Isaiah Wong. They're one of the best backcourts to do it. That's why Miami is the number 6 offense in basketball. We'll get into them a little later. And then obviously Iowa and Auburn, I feel like Iowa's offense is just not going to be able to handle Auburn's defense. That was definitely the reason there. Miami Drake, you mentioned it. That was one of the games where I was definitely going a lot back and forth pretty much all week because and the only reason I was because of the health of Norchad Amir, their inside third guy for Miami. There were rumors of him being out for that game, and you couldn't make the. Obviously, they were playing Friday, but the brackets locked on Thursday, so you had to make a guess on whether or not. And I stuck with the gut, and I picked Miami. And then obviously, it came out, I believe, later Thursday that he was going to play in tomorrow's game, in Friday's game, and that was great to see. So I was like, thank God, hallelujah, because I had Miami in the Sweet 16. But just the way that their backcourt has looked so great this year, definitely offense is winning them almost a championship right now. But they're playing against a good UConn team, so I don't know how well they're going to be looking against UConn. But definitely a great story for Jim Larinaga. It's crazy that yesterday was I think 5 or like something 6 year. No, it's not. It was like 16 years, excuse me. Something like that, 15 or 16 year anniversary of when he led George Mason to the Final Four. And now he leads Miami 15 years later to the Final Four for the first time in franchise and program history. Just amazing to see, the full turnaround there. So great for his program. Indiana, Kent State. This was one of the first round upsets where I actually had the upset. I had Kent State winning. I just thought that they could stop TJD, which is Trace Jackson Davis for all the people out there. I thought they were able to stop him, but nah, he's him. He's him. I definitely could see it now. And then, I just thought that, the offense of Kent State would be able to compete. And they came a little bit short, so no credit there. But then, obviously, Miami was able to stop them in the second round. So, Mike Woodson, leads his team to a number 4 seed after Indiana was floating around the top of the rankings and around the Big Ten. But, they bow out in the second round after going against one of the best backcourts in basketball in Miami. And then Iowa State looked absolutely abysmal the first half. That was one of the worst first halves that I've ever seen from just a team in general. And then Pittsburgh just took advantage of that, being I think it's the first year that both teams from the first 4 games from the 11 seed spot have won their opening round games and have won in the first round of the tournament. So kind of crazy that Pittsburgh and ASU. ASU didn't win. Excuse me. I'm sorry. So I forgot. My apologies. But
they almost won. But.
Yeah, they almost did. But I feel like I think this is another year where the trend continues that a team that wins in the first 4 makes it out of the first round. So, but that was just due because Iowa State couldn't shoot the ball, and even without Pittsburgh and their main guy inside, I love saying this guy's name, Federico. Even without him, Pittsburgh was able to get it done and move on to the second round. And you mentioned the game against Xavier, they almost had to sweat the first round against Kennesaw State. I mean, my goodness, Xavier, what are you doing? They sweat that, but Sean Miller got the win in the first round, and that was great to see. And they looked a little more comfortable in the second round against Pittsburgh, but at the same time, Pittsburgh came back near the end and they made it a little bit competitive and close because I believe it was like a 10-point game with like 90 seconds remaining at one point, so it was definitely very close. But Xavier held out for the win. Unfortunately, to get beat down by Texas in the Sweet 16. And then obviously the final 2 games in the first round over there, Texas A&M and Penn State. Look, that was one of the more highly anticipated games that turned out to be one of the more disappointing games because everyone was it was both ways, honestly. It was the people who, were saying that obviously Penn State's run and, what they did to be from one of the first teams out to playing themselves into the NCAA tournament, just coming short in the Big Ten title game, but, still having enough wins on their Big Ten tournament run to get there. Obviously amazing. And then obviously A&M, last year they were what Penn State tried to be, and what they came up a little bit short, but they missed the tournament. This year they made the tournament after they came up short in the SEC title game to Bama, but they had an impressive resume. And first round they definitely look like a favorite just because of how they've played, but the offense and what Jalen Pickett has done all year is amazing, and that's pretty much why Penn State got the win in the first round, just because of Jalen Pickett and his play. And then obviously Texas Colgate, it was Texas the whole way. And then Texas, Penn State made it close with Texas in the second half, but Texas got away with the win. And then Texas in the Sweet 16 against Xavier, that was a fun game, but it was definitely sad to see Dylan Dessou, one of the stars for Texas in the tournament, go down with an injury. And I kind of feel like that's the reason Texas kind of lost to Miami in the Elite Eight, just because of the fact that they were missing one of their key scorers in Dylan Dessou. As we mentioned, he's one of the key guys. He's the one. He was one of their offensive weapons, one of the offensive weapons in this whole tournament. So they get the win, but at what cost? It cost them another win because they lost to Miami, and shout out to Jim Larinaga and the Miami staff and their players, going to the Final Four. And you mentioned it, joining FAU as one of two teams from Florida to be in the Final Four, along with SDSU and UConn. So just very spread out everywhere. But this is definitely one of the more intriguing Final Fours, just because. And I am just reading an article right now that just popped up on my screen. It says men's Final Four tickets prices plummet because both Texas schools are out. So it looks like there's a lot of open seats for a lot of FAU fans, a lot of Miami fans, SDSU, UConn. Now you can go see your teams because a lot of people who bought tickets earlier, like guys from Houston, obviously a lot of people from Houston bought their tickets, but they lost to Miami. So maybe those Houston fans can sell them to Miami fans, and they can go instead. Or maybe some of those people from Kansas who want to give them to UConn, or maybe even some of the people who from Alabama to give them to this little tiny town in San Diego, California. Maybe especially the people from Boca Raton. I know a lot of people from Boca Raton want to go for this game, and I'm willing Purdue fans would like that, or maybe even Marquette fans. So definitely a great Final Four. I'm excited to see what's going to happen on Saturday, and then obviously the national title game 1 week from today. We will crown a champion on CBS, and right now, if I had to pick from this Final Four, I can't go against UConn just the way that they're playing already. I feel like UConn is the best team. I feel like they'll easily stop Miami offensively, and then defensively, I just feel like Miami won't be able to keep up with UConn just because of how good UConn is offensively. And then between SDSU and FAU, I want to say SDSU. I want to say them. But because of the game and how Creighton got screwed over, I'm going with FAU. I'm only going with FAU for that reason. I'm only going with FAU for that reason. Hootie hoo, let's go Owls. And then finally in the championship, FAU versus UConn. Can the FAU Owls beat the UConn Huskies in the national title game?
I mean, they have the 7-foot center that could do something against Sanogo.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. And I kind of want to hammer that. I kind of want to go FAU to win the title. I like what they're doing. I like how they're pretty balanced on both sides of the ball. They like to force a lot of turnovers, even though they turn the ball over a lot themselves. I feel like they can, if they just don't turn over the ball against a team like SDSU, then I feel like they can win the whole thing, because SDSU is going to be one of the harder teams, and especially because they know they can defend the three. And, FAU kind of likes to shoot the three ball. So it's definitely going to be a lot harder for FAU to win. But, I want to see FAU versus UConn and have FAU win the whole thing. But, you never know. Actually, me personally, I'd like to see FAU Miami. I'd love to see FAU Miami, just, the craziness of an all Florida battle for the national title. That'd be fun. Boca Raton versus Miami, that'd be a lot of fun. But this has definitely been the craziest year of March Madness ever, with just all the upsets. And now we have 2 5 seeds, a 4 seed, and a 9 seed in the Final Four.
Yeah, I mean, we say it like we said before. We say it every year that it's crazy, but this is like literally statistically the craziest year in terms of how, or not how far, but how not far the 1 seeds went. For the first time ever. And then, 3 first timers in the Final Four. So those games are on Saturday. So probably Friday we'll kind of take a deeper dive into the 2 Final Four games. We have opening day in baseball on Thursday. So probably Wednesday we'll kind of go over the MLB and all the latest with that heading into opening day. And then
we're also going to be doing some MLB season props for some of the bettors out there. Obviously, since the season starts Thursday, we're going to be doing some maybe last minute MLB season props, whether it's on Prize Picks or maybe do up futures for the MLB season, maybe like division winners and stuff like that. We're going to be doing all of that on Wednesday for you guys to get ready for the MLB season that starts on Thursday. Ari, I'm excited, man. I'm very excited. This is my favorite time of year. Baseball is my favorite sport, and this is definitely a big year for the Mariners, so I'm very, very excited to see, the opening day and all the opening matchups as we wrap up spring training this week.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And then we haven't talked about it in a while, but I think next week is the close of the NBA regular season. So probably next week we'll get into the NBA and the playoffs and all that. But for now, it will probably be mostly baseball Wednesday and then Final Four for the most part on Friday for this week. But yeah, so we will catch you all on Wednesday. Thank you, everyone.